the way Kirk Cousins has been playing as of late, my expectations have changed.
This is Locked On Sports Atlanta, and it's time for the Atlanta Football Party, only on Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
The Atlanta Football Party, your home for the best Atlanta Falcons football talk. It's local insight you can't get anywhere but right here at Locked On. I'm your host, Tenitra Batiste. Alongside me, our longtime Falcons reporter and analyst, Jarvis Davis, Aaron Freeman of Locked On Falcons, and 11 Alive anchor reporter, Maria Martin. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use code all lowercase LockedOnNFL to win $50 instantly when you play $5. And the Atlanta Football Party is part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So can we get that Dion repeat? We'll discuss. And can a couple of comebacks pay big dividends Sunday? We'll get to that. But first, let's talk about if it's the same or if the game to change for the Dirty Birds. So Jarvis, the Falcons have lost 3 consecutive games and have looked pretty paltry in the process. So after what you've seen, especially post-bye in that game last week, have your expectations changed for the Falcons?
Some. It has changed some because, it's hard to ignore the way Kirk Cousins has been playing. And I've been saying that, on football parties, postcasts, like Kirk Cousins can be the death or the resurrection of this team because this team goes how he goes. So if he continues to play like this, expectations are going to have to be out the window. And to be honest with you, that's kind of how I'm feeling about this game against the Minnesota Vikings because it's hard to get a good grasp on how he's going to play because he's so opt-in, right? Like he's like the stock market, like, kind of like not the stock market of today because that's been going pretty well, especially in the crypto for those who are interested in that type of stuff. But I think that, for me, I have to be kind of measured when it comes to how this team is going to play because I just don't know what I'm going to get from Kirk. And for those reasons, my expectations have had to change. Now, if he's playing against Tampa Bay, I already know what to expect. I know what's going down. But, oh, my gosh, anybody else, though, with a winning record, it's a little shaky.
Yeah, and Aaron, it's a little tough to not think about that because he's already admitted in some ways he's overthinking it and he's pushing. And who wouldn't overthink, push, and press going back to a team that basically, if you feel like they left you for dead, you might want to show that you weren't dead. As Jarvis said, you're resurrected for the Atlanta Falcons. But for you, when you look back at where your expectations were for this team earlier in the season, maybe even midway through the season before the bye and then after the post-bye, how have the expectations changed? And if so, how have they?
They haven't changed dramatically just because we've seen this story before with this team this year where when we face good defenses, it's a struggle. And that has been the through line throughout the season. So at this point, it's kind of like this is kind of who they are at this point. But yeah, it is one of those things where with Kirk Cousins and the poor performance, talking with Luke Braun of Locked On Vikings this week, he was sort of talking about how over the 6 years, it's like
basking in the glow,
but like how like basically this too shall pass, where it's like if Kirk plays really well, next week you're never going to know what you're going to get. And if Kirk plays really poorly, then the next week he might go out there and throw 4 touchdowns and whatnot. So I think with that's just kind of the roller coaster that is Kirk Cousins. That was the roller coaster that the Minnesota Vikings chose to get off this past year and the Atlanta Falcons chose to get on this year. So I think we'll sort of have to see how these next 5 games go, but I'm not particularly optimistic heading into this Vikings game just because of the sort of consistent through line throughout this season that whenever the Falcons face good defenses, their offense tends to struggle. But my hope, as I said earlier on the football party on Monday, is Kirk's bad performances the last 3 weeks. It was all just saving up for this Minnesota game, and he's going to go off this week, and we're all going to be like, yes, that's why the Falcons signed him this offseason. And that roller coaster, when things are going well, looks pretty good.
Yeah, Aaron is ever the optimist that we're going to return to Kirktober at some point. But, thank you to Luke Braun for giving you another opportunity for therapy. And we appreciate you, Luke. But for you, Maria, when you look at where you were at the beginning of the season, where you are now in your thought process of this team, what are your expectations? Have they changed? And if so, how?
Yeah, I mean, my expectations have tapered a little bit. I don't know that they've changed drastically. I still expect this team to make the playoffs, which a lot of people don't think that that's possible. But, this is a rough stretch, not a rough season. And, I tried to remind people yesterday, it can always be worse. Now, can it be better? It absolutely can. But look at the Jets, look at the Bears. The Falcons are in a lot better of a situation. Now, it's just the last couple of years with the Falcons being so close to making the playoffs and not getting it done. Obviously, it hurts a little bit more and it means a little bit more to the Falcons fans. So I get it. I still expect them to make the postseason. I also think that, let's remember, the general narrative around this team for the last couple of years is they were a quarterback away from changing things drastically. That's why you go out and get a franchise quarterback like Kirk Cousins. And that's exactly why, as we've seen in the last couple of weeks, wherever Kirk goes, that's where this team is going. That's what you pay quarterbacks $1 bajillion for, is to make sure that you can win the football game at the end of the day. Is it all on Kirk? No. But has he had some really bad performances and very concerning ones lately? Absolutely. I think it's good that he's going into a building that there's some familiarity. I don't really think that makes too much of a difference at this point in his career. 13th season, he's 36 years old. However, this would be the perfect opportunity for Kirk to change the narrative, to right the ship. Everyone has very low expectations for him in this offense right now, to the point where they're calling for Penix in the second and third quarter of football games. So if you can just turn it around, if Kirk can give you something else and get this offense to where we've seen it be before, that's why I say my expectations have been tapered, not drastically changed, because we've seen that they're capable of being a very good offense and a very good team collectively. At first it was, what the heck is the defense doing? Well, they've turned a page. Well, now let's get the offense back on their page. And let's not forget, the Minnesota Vikings, an incredibly good football team. I think it's a very big test for them on Sunday. However, they've won some really close games that they probably should have lost. So that's the NFL for you. Margins of error are super thin. So tapered expectations. I'm not necessarily jumping the opposite direction at this point.
Right, exactly. And you think about this, I know for at least 3, maybe 4 of us on this show going back to earlier in the season, I don't think we ever thought this team was a quarterback away, but I know a lot of people did. But I think where they are right now is showing you that they're not just a quarterback away, that there are a few more issues there. But thinking of what Maria said, as far as the NFC, you're absolutely right. There's still every chance for them to make the playoffs, because according to NFL.com, if the playoffs started today, there are still technically seven available playoff spots, obviously, across both leagues: Lions, Eagles, Seahawks. Falcons are still the number 4 seed for all intents and purposes. So there's still every opportunity for them to right the ship or keep the ship where it is and make sure that they win the NFC South and don't have to worry about going in as a wild card. That said, a part of righting the ship, Aaron, is if everybody plays to their potential, or if their coordinator helps them to play to their potential. That being said, Kyle Pitts had gone 4 straight games with 60+ yards receiving. Looked like he was turning a corner. Last couple games, not so much. 1 catch for 9 yards. So in your opinion, who's more at fault for KP's inconsistency? Zach Robinson or Kyle Pitts himself?
I think it's a little bit of both, right? I think it's probably a 60-40 split. You could probably go either way on that. But I'm going to point the finger at Zach Robinson just for a moment here, because we've seen Kyle Pitts struggle in this offense in September. We've seen him cook in this offense in October. I don't know if Kyle Pitts did anything differently in those 2 months to change how he played. I think it was really the offense being a little bit more invested in getting him involved in the offense with some of the vertical routes, with some of the underneath stuff. And I think part of the issue with Kyle Pitts, and I talked about this on Locked On Falcons this week, is because of how he's used in this offense, which is a lot of checkdowns and it's a lot of sort of vertical routes. He hasn't really had the opportunity to kind of build the rapport and the trust with Kirk Cousins because of the routes that he runs, where you've seen it these last couple of weeks, where sometimes Kyle Pitts is settling and Kirk's expecting him to run through the route and vice versa and all that stuff. And they just don't have that timing. And I think some of that is owed to how Kyle Pitts is used in this offense, where you're just not seeing him run those routes in the ways that Ray McCloud and Drake London and Darnell Mooney are in this offense. And so you're watching these games and you're like, these guys are not on the same page, even though they played 12 games together. And again, I think some of that, not all of that, but some of that is owed to how Zach Robinson has utilized Kyle Pitts. But certainly I do think Kyle Pitts has to take responsibility to step up, absolutely, and figure something out and be a bigger part of this offense moving forward. But it's unfortunate because we talked about this earlier in the season where it's like you have this very talented weapon in Kyle Pitts, or a potential weapon in Kyle Pitts, and it feels like he's being wasted. And again, some of that's the play calling, some of that's the player itself, some of that's on the quarterback, of course. And it's just, you're just sitting here, we're year 4 now, we were like, this was the year where Kyle Pitts is going to put it all together, and we got like 4 or 5 games of that, and it's like, can we get 4 or 5 more games of that so at least we can say we finally got something out of Kyle Pitts in these 4 years that he's been in Atlanta?
I think for the reasons that you just laid out, Aaron, that's why I feel like it's 95% Kyle Pitts. Because here's the thing: your quarterback has to be able to trust you to run the right route. Your quarterback has to be able to trust you that you're going to run full speed when you out there running those routes, and your offensive coordinator have to trust that you're going to do what you're supposed to do. Because we've heard things throughout the entire season. We've heard it from Kirk. We've heard it from even Jesse Bates. Hey man, all you gotta do is just go full go, man. He'll be a force in this league. What? All you gotta do is go full speed every time? Well, why are you not going full speed every time without your teammates saying anything? I mean, essentially, when you think about it, just from a psychological standpoint, if your quarterback is saying that to you, that's why you're not getting those targets. That's why your offensive coordinator is not putting those plays in there for you. That's why you're getting the ball on check downs and not necessarily being the first read on specific routes or specific plays. So I think that, that's why I feel like this is on the player for me.
Okay.
And I think that we're in a spot where you have to really take an assessment at the end of this year and figure out, okay, is this the guy that we want on our team going forward? Because what you don't want to do is get into the end of that contract and say, oh, okay, we can get him for less, and then we give him a contract, and then here you are 2-3 years down the road saying, dang, why they pay him?
Maria, your thoughts?
I have a lot of thoughts about this one. I'll say I'm a little bit in the middle, but what I will say is incredibly concerning is something Raheem Morris said on Monday about Kyle Pitts. When a head coach lofts the idea, just floats it out there, that it's possibly on the player, it's not a good thing. Coaches always want to put it on themselves. It starts with me, it starts with me and Zach. We need to do a better job. But when he says it could be our coordinator, it could be me, or it could be Kyle, we'll figure that out. It's not a good sign. And especially when it is the highest drafted tight end in NFL history. He gets the ball if he's that good. He gets the ball if he's a playmaker and a game changer and all of these things. Yep. And now he's seen a couple of different coaches, a couple of different coordinators, and we see the same stuff. At some point, there is a common denominator. And I don't want to put it all on Kyle, because we have seen, as Aaron mentioned, glimpses of him being good, being great even. But at the same time, there are underlying layers and tones that are coming from the coaches. And you don't get that very often if you have a player that has the potential that they think he has, or you don't need to have, there is a level of trust that has to be built between a quarterback and a receiver. I totally understand that point. However, at the same time, it's Kirk Cousins. He can get you the ball. I know that's hard to believe because he's thrown a ton of interceptions in the last couple games, but at the end of the day, that shouldn't be that hard if he's good. So whether it's lack of effort.
Got to wrap up. So I know you guys have a lot to say about KP. We'll probably
go on about this for days.
Exactly. I know we'll probably need to come back to him come Sunday post game or Monday Atlanta football party. But there's a group that actually showed out this past weekend. Can a couple of comebacks pay big dividends this Sunday? Again, we'll discuss when we take it under further review. This episode of our Atlanta football party is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That's at FanDuel.com. So think about it. We're going into the final weeks of the holiday season. Maybe there's some gifts you want to get. Maybe there are some things you want to buy before the end of the year. Maybe you could use a little extra money to get them. So don't forget, go to FanDuel.com to join today. Get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Hillsdale College. Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Introduction to Free Market Economics. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, discussions, or just enjoy the lectures. So go right now to hillsdale.edu/locked-on to enroll. There's no cost and it's easy to get started. That's hillsdale.edu/locked-on to register. Hillsdale.edu/locked-on. Nothing wrong with getting a little bit more education and a little bit more wisdom at hillsdale.edu/locked-on. So the Falcons defense had a masterful performance against the LA Chargers. Yes, we were talking about the defense having a masterful performance, which included sacking Justin Herbert 5 times. So for you, Aaron, is it possible that this defense can maybe put on another performance like that against the Minnesota Vikings this Sunday?
I mean, anything's possible, T. Anything is possible. I think it's definitely possible. I'm not going to go out on a limb and predict it just because I think the challenges that the Vikings present offensively with all the weapons that they have, it's going to be a little bit harder because you saw last week the Falcons play a little bit more man coverage than they have. I think that I charted it as the most man coverage they played in a game so far this season. And you could do that against the Chargers' weapons because basically the only one that you're really worried about is Ladd McConkey. And you do it against the Vikings, you got to worry about Justin Jefferson. You got to worry about Jordan Addison. You got to worry about TJ Hawkinson. Oh, and yeah, they got one of the best running backs in the league coming out of the backfield as well. So if you're going to play man coverage, like guys got to really step up this week. You're going to put AJ Terrell on Justin Jefferson. You're going to give him safety help. Then what does the other safety do? So you're going to get some one-on-one. So I don't know if the formula for success that they had against the Chargers is exactly something that you can just copy and paste to the Vikings game, because of the weapons that they have. But it does give me a little bit more hope that we will see this defense play better football coming out of the bye week because of the adjustments that they made and gearing their game plan, having something viable against this Vikings offense and to see if they slow them down. So I'm not particularly optimistic that we'll see 5 sacks and, shutting down that Chargers or shutting down this Vikings offense like we did last week, but it does give me a little bit more hope.
Yeah, and I think that's kind of where we are. If hope can spring eternal, if you can see something that maybe is a building block, albeit you may have to reset the building blocks, but if you can see something that's a building block, Maria, then maybe you can think to yourself on some level, you can see it on repeat from what you saw last Sunday to this Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, I think Aaron's right, spot on. Each game is its own entity and you have to approach things differently. Obviously, their defensive plan coming out of the bye was successful against the Chargers, and that same plan, I agree, will not work against the Minnesota Vikings. However, the Vikings offense, albeit they're very good and there's a ton of weapons, it's not like they're unstoppable. They're not like some of the other teams in the league. And, looking back to the Jags game that they played earlier in the season, they only put up 12 points. They've figured things out a little bit since then, but it's not like they're blowing anyone out by massive margins. It's certainly possible that the Falcons could have another good performance. I'll try to steer away from saying great performance on Sunday in Minnesota. I don't really know that that's going to get done. But if anything, the defense tells me that once they get to the postseason, because I still believe they will, they have a chance to actually make some noise, because that was the most concerning part to me. Although, yes, the offense has not looked great. I get it. But they were the most concerning part to me about being sustainable long-term this year. We all chalked it up to, this is what they are. They can't get any better. Well, they didn't make any moves, and somehow they did get better. I mean, I was mind blown against the Chargers at how aggressive they were. They looked like they were playing a lot tighter coverage, and it was just really refreshing to see. So I think it's really encouraging, and certainly they'll find success on Sunday. Not sure if it'll be this great performance that people might think, but I think they're definitely headed in the right direction for sure.
But Jarvis, Maria makes a great point. There are some places on the Minnesota Vikings schedule, and not just their losses, by the way, but their last couple of games where Chicago gave it to them, took them to overtime. They did get the win. The Arizona Cardinals gave it to them, and they came back and they won that game. So there are some little little cracks and crevices that maybe this defense can take advantage of as well.
Absolutely. If you can get Sam Darnold to start seeing ghosts, because he had a couple games where he threw multiple picks, right? Even 3 picks. And we know he's capable of that. And I think that, it's up to Jimmy Lake for him to expose that in a way. And I'm on board with Aaron and Maria. Like, you go out there and start playing a whole bunch of man coverage you want to. It's the reason why Justin Jefferson is the best wide receiver in the league. So I think for me, he's going to have to mix it up a lot. And when I talk about seeing ghosts, like disguising coverages, bring guys up as if it's showman, and then have him think it's man. And then as soon as that ball is snapped, you getting out of there. Like you getting out of there like quick, fast, in a hurry. And I think that Jesse Bates, this is the game that I feel that Jordan he's gonna have to really show improve himself, because I feel like they're gonna have to get extra possessions, like turning the ball over, because that's the key to life for a defense that can't rush the passer consistently, right? So if you can give the offense extra possessions, put the ball in the Vikings territory, and by turning them over, I feel like Kirk has done a pretty solid job, running off those turnovers for me, for it to be able to take advantage of those. And I think that's where, and I think Arne Educator said something really interesting. He said, he's talking about how they went out there and they were able to do it on the field because they've been putting in the work. Now that they put it on the field, hey, you got to live up to it. And they've done. And for me, we talk about expectations as far as, this team as a whole. Defensively, mine has changed because you made the you made the necessary adjustments and you were able to perform a certain way. I'm not saying you got to get 5 sacks and make Justin Herbert look very normal, but you can make doggone Sam Darnold look normal. You don't have to sack him 5 times. So if you can get 1 interception and 1 sack, hey, I'm cool with that, because like that's how you kind of, go through the season. That's how you grow as a unit. The more production that you put on tape, the more those guys within that locker room are going to believe that they can do it, and they're going to continue to put it out there as the season goes along.
Indeed. And the defense might be getting some help. A couple of comebacks may pay big dividends come Sunday. We'll talk about it and what's next. This episode of our Atlanta Football Party is also brought to you by Mint Mobile. With big wireless providers, what you see is never what you get. Somewhere between the store and your first month's bill, the price you thought you were magically going to pay magically skyrockets. So with Mint Mobile, you'll never have to worry about gotchas ever again. When Mint Mobile says $15 a month when you purchase a 3-month plan, they mean it. So say, okay, bye to your overpriced wireless plans, jaw-dropping monthly bills, and unexpected overages. And how many of us can say that we have had that situation and that occurrence? Me, you, probably everybody. So Mint Mobile is here to rescue you with premium wireless plans starting at $15 a month. To get this new customer offer and your new 3-month premium wireless plan for just $15 a month, go to mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. That's mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Cut your wireless bill to $15 a month at mintmobile.com/lockedonnfl. Locked On Sports Atlanta is a free 24/7 sports streaming channel and is programmed to bring you all Atlanta sports on one channel. Locked On Sports Atlanta also brings you the best coverage for the Falcons, Hawks, Braves, and Bulldogs, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. So, Maria, there were a couple of good returns to practice this week. Let's start with Ruke Orhorhoro, who returned to practice Wednesday, or designated for return to practice Wednesday. What type of impact could the rookie have in what feels like, for most of us, a bit of a must-win game?
Yeah, well, he provides you depth for sure. And in the games that he has played, he's shown you that his ceiling is really high. And I just enjoy him so much off the football field as well. I'm pulling for him because he's such a great learner of the game. He takes it very seriously. He tries really hard. He really wants to be the best version of himself. So I appreciate that so much. But in the games that he's played, he's shown you that he can be really successful, particularly against the run. And that's something that the Falcons really need. And especially on defense, we're talking about a unit who their trajectory is only up at this point. I like that Jarvis said his expectations change on the defense because so do mine. I mean, this was a unit where we consistently said, all right, this is what it is. It's not going to get any better. You just try to get better with the players that you have. And they did. So when you show us that you're capable of great things, that's kind of going to be the expectation moving forward, or at least get close to that margin. Ruke is certainly a player that can help you in that and provide the much needed depth that the Falcons really haven't had defensively.
Indeed. And what about for you, JD? What type of impact could Ruke have Sunday if he's able to go?
I'm with Maria. He's a depth piece, and because I love what I saw from Kentavious Street last week. Can we get more of that?
Yeah,
Can we go?
Yeah.
Can we go outside? Have a little fun outside on the street. Let's do that. I think that. But in all seriousness, though, I think Ruke he's a guy that needs to play in order for him to reach the best version of himself, like Maria talked about. He's not going to get better. You can't, like you said, they always say, the old saying is you can't make the club in the tub. You can't sit outside of there and be like, oh man, Ruke gonna be a good player, but he on IR. No, you can't. We already dealt with that with another player that was drafted in the second round. I ain't gonna name his name because I don't want Aaron to be looking at me crazy for the rest of this show. So, but I think that Ruke is this is perfect timing for him because I feel like being able to get into this rotation as this defense is starting to ascend, that's what we're going to go with this week. I feel like he's the type of guy that can get in there, especially against the run, because we know how soft the Falcons have been against the run. They did a good job of it last week. I want to see a back-to-back performance of being solid against the run and being aggressive. And we saw a lot of that, especially on screens. The way A.J. Terrell played that screen against the Chargers, oh my gosh, he made Quentin Johnson look like he wasn't even out there. Like, that's the type of aggressiveness I want to see all up and down on each level of football on this defense. And I think that Ruke can add to that.
Yeah. And for me, Aaron, I'm thinking our Oreo example or our bend don't break example, he just gives us an opportunity to have that conversation, a good part of that conversation come Monday, if he's able to go Sunday.
Yeah, I can't believe Jarvis is taking shots at Marlon Davidson at this stage in his career, because that's clearly who he's talking about. He's not talking about Troy Anderson or anything like that. But
I was talking about Jalen Collins, bro.
Okay. So I think with Ruke, you guys nailed it. He's a contributor, and I think you saw last week with the Falcons and their success against the Chargers. They did the thing that we've been talking about wanting to see them do, which is stop the run, right? Get them in, longer down in distance. They were able to dial up some blitzes on second and long and whatnot. And then they were able to get home with some of those pass rush because those guys were able to pin your ears back. And I think Ruke Orhorhoro can be a part of that first part because of what Maria said. He's such a good run defender that you can add him into this mix, stop the run on early downs, and get into some situations against this Vikings team where guys can pin their ears back, where that front can get home and make Sam Darnold make some of the mistakes. So I think Ruke is not necessarily going to be the piece that makes this defense and this defensive front go, but he can be a critical part of, sort of a piece of the puzzle.
Yeah, and same for Mike Hughes. Maria, I think that there's an opportunity for him to show up big too. He returned to practice this week, and earlier Jarvis was talking about Justin Jefferson and really all of those weapons that Minnesota has. So yeah, if you can get Mike Hughes back, that might be a good look too.
Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. I mean, they're going to need help, and to have a veteran presence like Mike Hughes come back, that's just going to be so monster for them. We're talking about depth up front. Well, the secondary is going to need a boost here because we know that Minnesota can push the ball down the field, and you're going to need that tight coverage from A.J. Terrell, from all of those guys back there. And so I think this is probably one of the more critical return pieces. Ruke, we're talking about the depth aspect of it, but Mike Hughes is the one that I was like, oh, okay, this is really good news for Sunday. And for the defense, I think in order to continue to take that step forward, you're going to need guys like Mike Hughes because he's been really good this year. And I think that he can continue to contribute to a group that is only ascending at this point.
Yeah, and JD, I think when we look at the history of that one position that this Falcons team has had some trouble with, it's tight end. So TJ Hawkinson could give some trouble as well. And any help that you can have, especially with DBs that don't mind tackling, I think it'll be a good look to have Mike Hughes back if they can get him.
Absolutely. And you can have there's some versatility there you can throw in there too, right? You can throw some different looks at, because I like the way Clark Phil's been playing. I feel like he's been playing really solid, really sticky coverage right there, being aggressive, now granted, has he been beat this year? Yes, absolutely. But that's going to happen in the NFL. Like that's the way the rules are. You're going to get beat as a cornerback. But I think that the way you come back after the next play and after the next play, that's what matters. And I feel like Clark has been that guy to kind of do that. So you pieced him with a guy like Mike Hughes, and you got that secondary Justin Simmons, with the way he played last week, that was promising. Like, and when you get all your whole secondary, which we coming into this season, we said that this was the strongest group coming in. So, hey, this strong group, hey, come up in a big game against a playoff contender. How about that? Those are type of things that you can say, all right, we invested some money into this part of our defense. So let's start seeing some return on that investment in games like these where you don't know what you're going to get from your quarterback necessarily. But oh my gosh, if you can give him a couple extra possessions to count from more so than that the Minnesota offense, man, you starting to set yourself up for success. And if Kirk messes that up, that's on him. Because what you don't want is to continue to be the whipping boy that they've been leading up to that Chargers game.
So thinking about that as we wrap up, Jarvis, you said it. Biggest test for which position group on the defensive side of the ball this coming week?
Oh, it has to be their secondary. We laid it out. T.J. Hawkinson, Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison. All of those guys are more than capable of taking you out if you don't account for those guys each and every play, specifically Jordan Jefferson. And I think that the one thing I feel like it's been the Falcons' issue, not necessarily this year, but kind of overall in the past few years. A lot of times they've been the guys that second wide receiver, like especially against Tampa, man. Mike Evans has had his games, but oh my gosh, Chris Godwin just murdered the Falcons in previous years. Like he's the guy that I'm scared of. Like Mike Evans gonna get his, but man, Chris Godwin can go to work on you because he can line up in the slot, and that's what you see with Jordan Addison too. So I feel like Justin Jefferson can kind of get his, 7 for 89. I'm cool with that, but don't let Jordan Addison get 5 for 125. Like you don't want that type of stuff to happen. You don't want to be giving up those big plays to the secondary wide receiver. So I feel like if this secondary has probably their biggest test that they're probably going to see, this year, just from a wide receiver standpoint.
Maria?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it's the same. The secondary. This is the second time this season that the Falcons defense had not allowed a touchdown. And look, Raheem Morris said earlier this week, you can't turn the ball over 4 times and expect to win a football game, yet the defense tried to make it a reality. The fact that they almost did win, even though they turned the ball over 4 times. And Justin Simmons said something really interesting in the locker room on Sunday after the Chargers loss. When we were talking about Kirk Cousins, he said, obviously it's not all on the quarterback. It has to be on everybody. He said, for us, I'm looking at us and thinking we didn't win the turnover battle. So he's challenging that group to be more aggressive in that aspect. And that's how you can win. This is going to be an unbelievable environment. The whole skull thing, it's going to be ridiculous. And so I think when you're at US Bank Stadium, when you need an opportunity to win, you got to lean on those guys in the secondary. And again, they've shown that they can be good. Well, you're going to get a pretty good test against a bunch of different weapons that Sam Darnold has that's made him look like an elite quarterback this year. Let's not forget that they look really, really good at times. And I like what you guys said. This is a test against a true playoff contender and a good football team in the NFL. The secondary guys are going to be the ones to help you win it.
Free for you, biggest test.
Yeah, I think it is the secondary. And as Jarvis said, Justin Jefferson is going to get his. I think you got to keep the other guys in check. That wasn't the formula that the Bears had. That they kind of let Addison and Hawkinson eat. The last time the Vikings lost a game, I think it was against the Rams, and Jefferson had a big game, but everybody else was quiet. I kind of think that's the winning formula. But just to be a little bit different, I do think the front is going to have to pick up some of the slack just because of all the challenges for this secondary. And if they can get pressure up front and make Sam Darnold make mistakes. That's going to make it easier for this secondary's job to capitalize on some of those errant throws and maybe create some of those turnovers that we're talking about.
Are you challenging Matthew Judon? Is that what I heard?
I mean, I didn't name him, but I said the entire front. But if you want to point the finger at one specific player that wears the number 15 in long sleeves, then sure, Jarvis.
Oh, okay.
Then do that.
I was just
Then
making sure
go
I
ahead
heard
and do it.
correctly.
Yeah, you heard what you didn't hear. Thanks to our everydayers for making the Atlanta Football Party your first listen of the day. Be sure to stop by the Atlanta Football Party now on Mondays and Thursdays. Like and subscribe to our YouTube channel, and we're also free and available wherever you download your podcast. We'll see you Monday when we break down how the Falcons fared in Minnesota.